Thanks, Julian, and particularly thanks to Ian today. My name is Jeff Stangl, CFA Society New Zealand. I would know most of you, if not all of you, and it's really our great pleasure to have back, and I think this is actually a first for the Society's webinars, Encore Performance by, by Ian on financial modeling. Thank you, Ian. Thank you to the Financial Modeling Institute. This is obviously, and Julian for organizing all this, this is obviously a topic that is near and dear to everyone's heart. And can I say personally that there's nothing more exciting than financial modeling or Excel modeling. I love it. I wish I could be here the entire thing. I'm going to have to watch the video playback later, but I'm sure that you won't be let down after the brilliant first performance from Ian, and this will be another great one today. So thank you again, everybody. And with that, I will pass over to you, Julian, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So it's this is the first, so I get to introduce Ian.
All right.
I'm just kidding. You know, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Okay, excellent. Well, that is great. And listen, thank you, Jeff. A very kind, generous welcome. It is great to be back in Auckland, and wish you could stay here, but I'll call you to quiz you on some of the topics I covered later in the week. So listen, it is great to be back. Thank you for having us back. Had a great fun time and a webinar here. I guess it was a couple months ago, and looking forward to doing today's this afternoon. So let me quickly walk you through what the plan is this afternoon. And then we will jump right in. So like the last webinar, this is also sort of a 90-minute webinar. It will go until it's noon, I think, right, Jeff, right now?
It is noon, yep.
It is noon.
Exactly.
So we'll go till 1:30. I'm gonna try and stop about 10 minutes early to take questions. And if there's lots of questions, Julian and I are happy to stick around a little bit longer and continue taking questions if you like. So I'm gonna jump in. I've got about 5 or 7 minutes of some introductory comments, and then I'll jump right into the content just to kind of warm up and get started. By the way, if you see me looking over to my right, I'm looking over at a screen of all of you. I've seen all of your great names, and looking forward to interacting with you. I like to keep it interactive as much as possible. I've been teaching for a long time, and I like to keep an interactive discussion. So can I just start by asking if you can just raise your hand just to make sure you can hear me okay? Just make sure you're comfortable. Is everyone ready to go and can hear the volume's good? Okay, excellent, great. I'm seeing lots and lots of hands go up. Fantastic. Well, it's great to see all of you. Thank you for letting me know that you're ready to go. By the way, just also by another quick show of hands while I have you, was anybody here for the first webinar that we led whenever it was in January or February? Anyone do we have any returning guests? Okay, great. A number of hands going up as well. Great to see a bunch of you back. I actually recognize some of your names that had come the first time. It's really great to see you back again. So let's do this, guys. It's a few minutes past the hour. I'm going to jump in with a quick introduction for those of you who have not met me before. And within about 5 or 6 minutes, we'll get started and we'll dive right in. This is topic 2 in our free webinar series on financial modeling. We've been running this one all over the world now as well, and it's been getting some great feedback. Did it in the Philippines a few days ago, and really people seem to really be enjoying it. So just by way of background, for those of you who haven't met me, I'll go to my little page here. So my name is Ian Schnur, as Jeff mentioned. Bye, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my name is Ian Schnur, and Julie and I are actually over here on the other side of the world in Toronto. We are, I think, are not doing nearly as well as you guys. We are actually still in lockdown, and things are hoping we're going to get better around here, but we still can't go anywhere. Nothing is open. So it's really fun to be here and chatting with you guys, pretending we're in New Zealand where things are, I think, going a little bit better. But just again, by way of background, so my name is Ian. My background is I started my career in investment banking. I worked at a bank called BMO for a few years, and then I spent a couple of years at Citibank. It was Solomon Smith Barney back there, and doing traditional M&A advisory work, doing a lot of modeling. And then around 20 years ago, I left banking and I started this business called the Marquee Group. The Marquee Group is a training firm. We are based in Toronto, but we train all over the world. And we run training programs for banks, pension funds, and lots of universities all over the world, both our live instructor courses, which are now through Zoom, all of them, or our self-study programs. So I've had the privilege of teaching for the last 20 years and about modeling and modeling topics. And it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart and get very passionate about. And around 5 years, but that's not the capacity that I'm here today. Today, I'm here as executive director of the Financial Modeling Institute. Around 5 years ago, with some other organizations, we went out and we created this organization called the FMI, the Financial Modeling Institute. You can see here our logo on the very front. The FMI, think of it more like the CFA Institute. Our mandate is to provide rigorous, challenging testing in the field of financial modeling. And I'll show you one quick slide. I'm not going to talk much about the FMI, but we have sort of a 3-level program. What's different, though, about the CFA is that in this program, each level earns you an accreditation. So after the first level is called the Advanced Financial Modeler, the AFM level, then the Chartered Financial Modeler. But the point is, we realized that there was no way in the world for people to prove that they had strong modeling skills. There are a number of online tests, and there are some training firms that have tests afterwards and multiple choice tests, and they're fine. They have some nice programming. But this is the only program that truly puts people through a rigorous 4-hour exam where you actually have to build up a model from scratch. That's the purpose of the AFM level. If you're interested in learning more, there's a bunch of slides at the back. We had to move everything virtually starting last year, so it's actually going very well. Last weekend for the April sitting, we had people from 45 countries around the world writing the exam. By the way, when the webinar is over, we're going to share all of our materials, the slides and the Excel model that I'm going to share. When you get to the very back, you can take a look at these on your own. We have a bunch of slides that talk about how the FMI works, an overview, the purpose, what we're setting out to do all around the world. And there's also a number of training providers around the world. These are training firms that provide modeling training. And this one here, CFS Modeling, is based right in Auckland in New Zealand. So that is sort of our mandate and what we're setting out to do. So why are we here today? Well, we have developed a very close relationship to the CFA Institute. The CFA Institute actually approached us a few years ago. It was the president and CEO at the time. And he said that he told us that the #1 request of CFA candidates and charter holders around the world is to please add financial modeling to the CFA program, to the curriculum. But that's not possible. It's just too much content, too much time. So they don't have any intention of adding modeling. And they were very pleased to know that we are out here running similar types of rigorous exams in the field of modeling. They encouraged us to develop relationships with CFA societies all over the world. And so we've done that. And so we developed a free webinar series. Topic #1 was what we did a couple of months ago, and it's on top 10 tips to build a world-class model. Today, we're going to get into topic 2, which is a lot of fun. We're going to get into some really great tips that I hope you enjoy on skills to check and review a financial model, what to do when something goes wrong. So that's how we're continuing to build relationships with people all over the world. Because we have a close relationship with societies, we also offer a discount to anyone who's at the webinars. If you're interested in some of the exams, please let us know. Follow us on social media if you like, on LinkedIn, and certainly on LinkedIn, and to keep up with what we're doing. So that's kind of a little bit about who we are. But now I want to get into the meat of why we're all here, to talk about a really critical skill of how to check and review a financial model. So let's jump in here. So my first question, I'm going to look over at you guys, is who here has ever been asked to check or review someone else's model? Do me a favor, raise your hands if you have ever had to check or review someone else's financial model. It is a very, very common skill. I'm guessing many of you have. A lot of hands going up. Excellent. It's good to see a lot of hands. Yeah, we all, if you've spent enough time in financial modeling, you will at some point have been asked to check someone's financial model. So today what we're going to do is I'm going to look at both. I'm going to show you some great skills to check a model, but I'm also going to share with you for about 10 or 15 minutes at the end, towards the end, I'm going to share with you a process that I find really helpful to check a model. So we're going to spend most of the webinar on some technical skills and then a process to check and review. By the way, let me ask you another question. So I just asked who here has checked a model, and a bunch of your hands went up. Can I ask you again another question? Was it fun when you have to check someone else's model? How many of you had a lot of fun? Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of hands going up. Oh, just a couple. I always like when a couple people raise their hands. I wish I could speak with you. Sometimes I like to ask people, because let me tell you, only a couple people raised their hands just now. But a lot more people raised their hands when I asked who has had to check it. I will tell you, now some people say that they like the challenge of finding errors or finding mistakes. And I do get it. I agree. That can be fun. But let me tell you here, checking a model is, I will say checking a model is often very stressful. It's often one of the most stressful things you can do is be asked to check someone's financial model. Why? Why is it often a very, very stressful task? It's because if you spend a couple hours one evening checking someone's model, and the next day you say to your boss or your client, you say, yeah, you know what, I checked it, spent a couple hours and it looks pretty good. If you basically bless it and you say that the model looks pretty good and you've done a bit of a check, what's just happened? There's a bit of an unspoken transaction that's happening, and you probably know it's happening, but no one ever says it. No one is actually verbalizing it. I feel like I can hear some of you all the way from Auckland telling me, yeah, you're right. What happens when someone asks you to check a model? If you bless it and you say the model seems to be working, you've taken ownership of that model. By default, you have de facto become the owner. Because if down the road someone ever discovers a problem with the model, they're not going to blame the model builder at that point. They're going to blame you. It's your fault because you didn't find the errors. So it can be really, really stressful to check models because you might know that there could be errors. And if you don't find them, it becomes your fault. The best thing that can ever happen when you have to check someone's model, the best thing that can happen is you find a bunch of mistakes. Because if you go back the next day and you say, listen, I spent a couple hours, I found 5 or 6 mistakes and 3 or 4 other little issues, and there's probably more stuff going on. It's not going to stick to you. No one's going to attach the model to you because they know that you're finding issues. By the way, if you ever get asked to check a model, my strong recommendation is to say, no, thank you. I don't do that. No, just kidding. You can't do that. If your boss says, can you check this model? You've got to check the model. So let me put a couple notes here. It's often very stressful because if you bless it, you've taken ownership of it. Whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, you've taken ownership of that model. So I will put a note here, right? The best thing to happen is for you to find some errors. And I will tell you, almost every single model, most models are not built that well. And a lot of models have mistakes. So what I want to show you is some really great skills to find those mistakes. I promise you, so here's my promise today is that if you can think about and learn and get comfortable with all the skills that I'm going to show you today in today's webinar, you will maximize the probability of finding errors. In fact, I'm even going to go as far as to say that if there are errors in the model, you're going to find them using the approach and the techniques that we're going to go through here. Okay. So that's kind of what we're going to do as we jump in here. So I actually have sort of a top 10 list as well of model checking skills. Before we get to that, again, very simply, why is it so important? It's actually a very different skill. Let me go back to my webinar series for a second. It's one skill to know how to design and build a world-class model. It's a very different skill to know how to properly and thoroughly check a model to see if anything has gone wrong. So we're going to go through some very, very different tips and skills today to really check one. So why? Well, if someone else built a model, you need to be comfortable with the model and you need to make sure that it can be relied upon. And if there's mistakes, you're going to find those mistakes. And so that's one issue there. In fact, And if you built the model yourself, if you actually built the model, it's really important for the credibility of you, your own credibility, your own reputation, to make sure you've checked it before you hand it in. So let's dive in now and take a look. So there's a bunch of tips here on what page is it here? This is page, it's got to slide down a little bit. Page 10 and 11 have got some of the tips, but I'm going to write them down as well. And I'll put them like this: skills to check, because I'm going to add some color commentary. I'm going to add some commentary around them. And by the way, this notes file, well, just as a reminder, I told you we're going to send you the materials. The webinar is actually being recorded as well. So if you want to watch it after to refresh yourself, or if your friends or someone wants to watch it, it's going to be recorded and posted by the CFA Society. And I'll be sending my notes file over as well. So you'll have this. So here is the very first thing I like to do. Now, before I show you the tip, let me actually show you the model that we're going to be looking at. This model is called the Henderson Manufacturing Company. This is one of the sample models that we use at the Financial Modeling Institute. It's actually on our website, so you're welcome to go get it if you want. This is a manufacturing business. It doesn't really matter what they make. Let's take a quick look at the model. I have a cover sheet, very, very simple. I have an executive summary, which just lists the answers under a few different cases, very, very simple. I have a sheet that's got all the assumptions in the model, just the data inputs, the inputs and assumptions. I've got a scenarios page. You'll see this. You'll be able to play with this on your own. This is more assumptions. I can play with these assumptions using a base, best, and worst. In the first webinar, I talked about this page and how to build it. But here now today, I want to talk about this particular sheet. This is the model sheet. This is the real guts of the model. This is the engine, if you will. It's got all my calculations and all my financial statements. Take a look. I've got the revenue schedule here. I've got a cost schedule here. Underneath that, there's an income statement. Do you see as I go down, there's my income statement. There's a cash flow statement. No surprise, the balance sheet is underneath. Just get a feel for what's going on. And then other calculations underneath. Fine. Well, my first strong recommendation, if you ever audit a model, is this. You'll notice when I go into my zoom magnification here, it tells me that my zoom is set to 100%. Well, that's normal. If you're at around 100, that's how you can actually see your numbers. But I'm going to tell you something. Whenever you look at a model under 100%, it gets hard to check it and review it because you're only seeing a very tiny, tiny portion of the model. So I'm going to tell you something that sounds pretty obvious, but this has helped me so much over the years. My strong recommendation is when you first open up a model and you want to review it, I'm going to say zoom down, right? Zoom down. I'm going to say IE to whatever, 30% or 40%. Get really small when you first look at it. Obviously, you won't be able to see the numbers anymore, but that's the point. Look what happens here. And by the way, how do I get into my zoom menu in Excel? It's going to be Alt V and then the letter Z. That's my favorite navigation stroke, Alt V Z. That's an old-fashioned keyboard shortcut from the old days, but I quite like it because it's intuitive. Think of it this way: Alt and then View, the zoom menu, View Zoom, Alt V Z. Pretty logical, right? But if you want to use the new menus, you need to go to the Alt key, and then View is now the letter W, so Alt W and then Q. Why Alt W Q? I have no idea. Is it logical? No, it's not intuitive. It's not logical, but that works as well. Alt W Q. Either way, you're going to open the zoom magnification. Let's try this. I'm going to go to my zoom. I'm going to go to the model. Please, guys, take a look. And I'm going to change it to, let's say, go down. I want to go down to around 30%. Look what happens when you do that. As I mentioned, you can't see the numbers, but this is a very powerful way to start checking a model, because it gives me a very helpful perspective on how the model was built. Look what I can do now. I can start scrolling down and scrolling down the page, and now I understand exactly how the model builder built it. I can get a sense for all the different sheets, all the pages. I can already tell that it's well organized, well designed, and I can get a feel for where everything is. Do you know what happens to me all the time? Has this ever happened to you guys? Have you ever been working in a model And all of a sudden you noticed, lo and behold, that way off to the side, there was more stuff. Raise your hands if you've ever seen this. Has anyone noticed in a model that way off to the side here, there were more things? Yeah, lots of hands going up, way off to the side stuff, more dots, more calculations. We call these little data islands. They're little islands that are floating off there to the side. And I'll be honest, it's really not great design to do that. But if I'm checking someone's model, I want to know, I want to be aware. So zooming down gives you a really helpful perspective on where everything lives and where all the pieces are. Now I can go here and I can zoom back up to see what that is. Otherwise, I might miss it. I might never realize that something was there. So I'm going to put a note here that says, if you zoom down Alt-V-Z, I like to say it gives you a bird's eye view of the model. How is it built? Where does everything live? And it will make it much easier to check the model later once you appreciate how the model builder constructed it. So that is one great thing. I have had so many people tell me that even that little tip gives them a nice sense for where everything is, and they can see weird, strange things off the bat. So that's the first tip here. You can see in my slides, it just says gives you a bird's eye view, gives you a sense for where it is. Now, the next tip that I want to share with you is this, is when you're zoomed down, while you're zoomed down, my recommendation is to check for hidden white values. And it makes sense to do this. I'm going to say do this while zoomed down. Has anybody here, I'm looking over at you again, has anybody ever been working in a spreadsheet and you noticed to your horror that a bunch of numbers had been turned white? Have you ever worked in it or looked in someone's spreadsheet and seen what the heck is going on? Oh, look, a lot of hands going up. Yeah, you notice what the heck is going on. The model builder made a bunch of numbers white and you had a little panic attack, a little heart attack when you thought, what the heck is going on? Not optimal. Why do people do that? Different reasons. They don't want you to see something or they don't want to print it. But my point is, if I'm checking someone's model and there are white values, I need to know. I need to find them. So it's really helpful to check for white values while you're zoomed down. And what we do is while you're zoomed down, you're going to select the entire sheet. And I'm sure many of you know that the keyboard shortcut to select the whole sheet is what? Control and the letter A, right? Very good. Thank you. So Control and the letter A will select a whole sheet. Take a look. I'm going to go to my model again, and I'm going to press Control and the letter A. There you go. It selected the entire sheet. Now, what I'm going to tell you is what it did, right? What it did was it painted the entire background gray. In older versions of Excel, 2016 or earlier, just doing this will highlight any white cells because they will look white against this gray background. So what I want to share with you is in older versions of Excel, this will highlight any white cells. That would be good enough. In the newer versions of Excel, that doesn't work. So in newer versions, which is what I'm using Excel 365, and in newer versions, you need to paint the background gray. Okay, so no big deal. It only takes an extra second. Watch this, please. I'm going to go back to the model. I'm going to go Control A to select it. And now, very, very simply, I'll just use my mouse so you can see what I'm doing. I'll go to the home screen and I'll go into the theme colors and I will change the background gray. Really simple. And watch what happens. I'm going to go, whoa, what the heck is going on? A whole bunch of numbers here are lighting up white. What's happening? And now I can zoom back in and see what's going on and try to figure out what the user did. And I can scroll down to see if there are any white cells. So again, I'll just undo that and we'll go back to where we were. But again, really powerful to start this way. You will have a good grasp on some major issues going on. Guys, imagine that you were asked to check a model, okay? And in the first 2 minutes, you zoom down and you realize it's not that well designed. And there's a bunch of nonsense off to the side and a lot of calculations way off to the side. So you keep a list. By the way, always keep a list of issues when you're checking a model. So the first thing you note is there's some calculations all over the place, not that well designed. And then you do this, number 2, and you discover some white cells. You already have a good list and you can start to relax because you have already found a few things. And you know that there's probably going to be other things you're going to find on your journey here. So those are just the first 2, super simple, but I can't tell you how many times we have found issues just doing those 2 things. So let's now move over to point number 3. We're going to try and look for dead inputs. This is one of my favorites. I'm going to put a note here. Point number 3 says, check for dead inputs in the model. What does that mean? Let me show you here what I'm talking about with a dead input. And I want to know in just a moment if any of you have seen what I'm going to display right now. Take a look, please. I'm going to go back to the model, okay? I'm going to go back to the model here. Let's go back to my regular zoom. I'll go back up to 100%. Good. Take a look, please. The very first part of the model is the revenue calculations, my revenue schedule. And the way we built up revenue for this company, it's a very simple business. The way we've built up revenue is we have a section that forecasts the selling price of the company. Then we have a section that builds up the sales volume. And then no surprise, the very bottom is the actual revenue. So how did I calculate revenue here? Well, that's pretty simple, right? It's just price times volume. It's a pretty no-brainer, very, very simple. Okay, so no problem. So let me show you what people sometimes do. Take a look, please, at my pricing section. In the pricing section, here's how this company deals with selling prices. Like a lot of companies, they have a gross selling price. This is the gross number. Now, this is an assumption, so it's coming from one of my assumption sheets. It's actually coming from my scenarios page because those are some of our critical assumptions. This company has a gross selling price, and then they have to deduct freight and warehousing because this company has to ship the product to their customers. So what they actually realize is their net selling price, which is very simple. Everyone see this is the gross minus the freight. Really, really easy. No big deal. And that's what's going on. Well, let me show you this. Take a look, please, at my 3rd year of the forecast, 2022. Imagine, please, that you were working on a model and your boss ran into your office and your boss was a little bit worked up, a little bit panicked. Does anybody work with bosses that sometimes get a little bit worked up, nervous? Nobody. That's amazing. I got to come to a couple of hands going up. I used to have some very, very nervous bosses in investment banking that would just show up at my desk nervously every 5 minutes and say, how is it going? And I'd say, well, nothing's changed in the last 5 minutes. But imagine you had a very nervous boss and they came up to you and they said, quick, I have a client on the phone. I need to know right now, what would happen if the net selling price in this year was not 718, it was not 718, but what if it was 750, 750? So remember, right now I have a gross price. I'm deducting freight and warehousing, and that gets me to my net price. And my boss is saying, Ian, I want to know right now, what would happen if this number was 750? What would that do to EBITDA and net income? So what do? You know it's not a good idea, but I want my boss to kind of go away. So what might you do? You might go to the cell and type in 750 and punch it in. And then you'll go to your boss and you'll say, hang on a second, write this down. You'll say to your boss and you'll slide down to the income statement. And you'll say, okay, what happened here? Let's see. EBITDA. EBITDA has gone up to 86. Do you got that? EBITDA is 86 and the net income is 39.5, right? Got it? Okay, good. Your boss writes that down and then they run off. Good. So now they're gone. You gave them the answer. Well, then what happens? Well, then, of course, what happens is you get distracted and something happens. Your phone rings. You get an email, a text, shiny object flies by. I don't know. Something happens and you get distracted and you save the model and you close it or you move away and you forget. Guys, help me out. How many of you have ever done this? How many of you have ever typed in a dead number in a cell or found a dead number like this in a cell while you're working through a model? Has anyone ever done this? I'm looking over. Has anyone ever done this or seen this in Excel before, right? Just dead inputs typed right in? Sure you have. We've all done that before, and we always intend to fix it, but you might forget. You might forget to switch it back. Guys, can I tell you something? As far as I'm concerned, this model is now completely ruined. It's completely ruined because I can't tell. It's not obvious to me that this number is dead, but because it's a black number. Black numbers are supposed to designate formulas, indicate that's a calculation, but this is a dead number. So what I want to show you is a very important and powerful way to check a model for dead inputs, just like that. And there's a really powerful skill that goes something like this. What you're going to do is you're going to press the F5 key on the keyboard. F5 is the go-to key. Everybody knows that F5 is the go-to key. That's fine. But what you might not have seen before is that on the go-to menu, there's a button that says special. Now, don't ask me why they called it that at Microsoft, but apparently there are special places that you can go. Take a look here. I'm going to click the special button, and it shows me all the special places that I can go in this model. And I am going to click on the option. The one I like a lot for checking models is this second one that says constants. Watch please what happens when I click constants and click OK. It highlights every single cell in the entire sheet that was entered as an input. Now, obviously, I'm okay. I'm okay if it highlights the text labels. That's fine. These are my labels. I'm also okay that it's highlighting my historical data. Those are dead numbers. But this is going to scare the heck out of me when I realize what the heck is going on. That's not supposed to be a dead input. And now all I need to do is scroll down and see, yep, that's okay. Income statement. These are all input. They're historicals. But I do not want to see any dead numbers entered on the financial statements or anywhere in the forecast. This one's going to scare me. I'll go see what's going on and go, wow, someone typed that in. I promise you, if you do this enough times, when you check models, you are going to find dead numbers that shouldn't have been that way. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are going to try this on one of your own models after? Let me know. I hope you tried this. We find so many. Great. Excellent. Lots and lots of hands going up. Excellent. Thank you. Right. Tracy, Richard, thank you. Can see all your hands. Very nice. I really hope you try this. It's so simple. And it's an extremely powerful way to look for things that shouldn't be there, that might be hard to find. So let me talk about this. Check for dead inputs. What do I want to say on this? You're going to press F5, or you could also press Control and the letter G. Control G also to get to the go to menu. And then I will say here, then press the special button and then constants. And it will highlight every single dead input in the entire sheet. So quick, so powerful to find any inadvertent numbers that were typed in. So I hope you find that helpful. I find so many issues just doing that one all over the place in models. It's a great skill to use. One time when I was teaching a class, a research analyst came up to me during a break, and he asked me to take a look at his model. He told me it wasn't working, and he asked if I could help him find some of the issues and errors in his model. So I grabbed his laptop and I said, just give me a quick second. So I did that. I said F5 special. I didn't tell him what I was doing. I just said F5 special constants. And the whole thing lit up like a Christmas tree, like every second number shaded, and the whole thing I went down and there were shaded numbers all over the place. And so I told him the first problem he had that it wasn't actually a model. He may as well have built it in PowerPoint. He just typed in numbers all the place. And so he said, oh, and he just went off. I didn't hear from him again. But the point is, you can find some stuff that shouldn't be there just by using this technique. Let me find this. And fix it. So now I fixed it and put it back. Okay. So that is point number 3. Let's go through a few more here. Now, I just showed you how to find dead inputs, but usually when I'm teaching, a lot of people will say to me, okay, Ian, that's good, but what if that's not what the model builder did? What if they didn't type in 750? What if they had A minus B, they did a formula, and then they added a hard code at the back? What if the model builder said A minus B and then put a plus 30? We call those hard codes. Has anyone done that? Can you raise your hands? Has anyone ever seen that? I'm sure everyone here has. Just raise your hands if you've seen something like that recently, or you've done something, right? Yeah, I'm looking over lots and lots of hands going up. You've all done that. We've seen that, right? Sometimes we do it. We know we shouldn't, but we want to test something. This is a bit of a disaster because, again, I don't know what that means. If I'm checking the model, I don't know why that's there. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to change it. So the next thing that I need to do when I'm checking a model is if I'm checking a model, I want to look for hard codes. That's called a hard code, a dead number in the back of a formula. Now, let me ask you, I like asking this to a group. If I go back into the tip I just showed you, F5, and then special, and then constants. If I go to this technique that I just showed you and I click OK, do you think it's going to light up this cell? Will it stop and light this one up? I hope you're guessing no. And if you guessed no, you're correct. It won't. It won't. It's not going to select that one because it's not a dead input. It's a formula with a hard code at the back. But now when I check a model, the next thing I want to do is I want to look for hard codes, because almost every single model that I have ever checked has hard codes like this in the back of formulas somewhere. And I want to find these as well. It's really, really important to find this. And I've got 2 excellent tips for you to show you how to find hard-coded values. Let me put some notes here on the screen. So the next thing I want to say is check for hard-coded values in formulas. And I have 2 options for you with this particular skill. We'll call it A. This is a nice feature here. I like this one. This one's pretty good. The next one is even better, but I like doing this one as well. What I will say is for A, my recommendation is change all cells to be looking at the formulas, okay? And this is a simple tip. You might have done this by accident. The keyboard shortcut is just to go Control plus this single backslash, and that key is usually under the escape key. Now your keyboard might be a little different, but it's under the escape key on a lot of keyboards. If it's not there, or you can go to this menu, you can go to the formula menu here, Alt-M, formulas, and then show formulas. You can go to formulas, show formulas, and that is Alt-M-H, and watch what happens, please, when I do that. If I go to my model again and I press that keystroke or Alt-M-H, it will change all my cells so that now I'm no longer looking at the values, but rather I'm looking at the formulas. And I'm going to come back in 1 second. My strong recommendation, I would encourage you, it's a good idea, is spend 1 minute scanning a model this way, right? Just spend a minute, scan down the model, because if there's a lot of obvious, blatant issues, you will start to see them just by doing this. So take a look. Now, I just encourage you to take a look and scroll down. If there's a lot of strange things, you might start to notice them. You might not catch everything, but you will definitely see certain things. So for example, if you're watching carefully, I might notice, wait a second, this will jump. You'll train yourself to notice hard codes. I should not be seeing a +30. Certainly if there's a lot of +30s or +5, you will start to see it, look, as you scroll down. And so as I scroll down my income statement, I don't know if it's perfect yet, but what I do know right now, just by doing a quick scan, is there's no hard codes. There's no +30s entered in any of these cells. And so I would scroll down the model. It's a nice way to take a look at it, and you will find some mistakes that way. That's the first way to look for hard codes. I'm going to show you, though, what I think is an even better way. An even better way to check for hard codes. Well, it's maybe you'll think the first one is better. I like both of them, but this way is also quite nice. We use this a lot. This one, because this will find more subtle. What I'm going to show you now to check for hard codes will find more subtle problems as well. Now, the tip that I want to share with you is this. The tip that I want to share says, in theory, when you check a model, you should only need to check one column. When you check a model, you should only ever need to check one column. What am I talking about? Take a look. Can you imagine, guys, could you imagine checking someone's model and checking every single cell? It's not possible. Nobody has the patience to check every single cell. Take a look at my net price. Could you imagine doing this? Going here and saying, yep, that one looks good. Yep. Yep, that one looks good. And then, oh, I found an error there. That one looks good. You're not going to do that. It's much, much too time consuming. And by the way, I have only a 5-year model. Some models get a lot longer. Guys, quick show of hands. How many of you have ever built or worked with really long life models? Like, let's say 20 years or longer. Just raise your hands if you've ever worked with a model that has a lot of years, 20 years or more. A bunch of hands going up. Certain industry sectors is very common to have long models. So for instance, if you're building an infrastructure model or a lot of natural resource models, mining, oil and gas, they'll do 20, 30, 40 years, maybe the life of the asset. I saw the longest model that I ever saw in my life not too long ago. We were looking at a client model and noticed that they had forecasted 120 years. And I said, really? Really? Do you really need to forecast 120 years? You're going to be dead, you know? And they said, yeah, I guess that's right. That's pretty silly. So they decided to cut it back. They cut it back to 60 years. Still a lot, but whatever. Anyway, the point is, if you're looking at a model that's 20, 30 years, there's no way that you can check every single cell. It's not possible. It would take way, way too long. So my point is, in theory, you should only ever have to check one column. Why is that? Why? I'll say because if the model builder did a good job, they would have built a formula and then what? And then copied to the right. They would have built and then copied. You build a formula, you copy it over. You build a formula and you copy it over. So what I wish I could do is this. I wish that there was a way that if I checked one formula and I like it, that's a good formula. I wish there was a way that I could select a whole row, whether it was 5 years or 50 years. I'd like to select the whole row and immediately know if there's any problems. If there's any differences. Are any of the cells different than the first one? Well, the good news is there is a way. There's a really, really great keyboard shortcut. Let me just jot this down. I'm going to say use Control and the / key to look for row differences. To look for row differences. Take a look what happens here, guys. Watch this. If I like the first formula and I select the whole row and I press Control and the /, watch what happens. It stops at the one that's different. It knows that this one is different than the first one. I can say, what the heck is going on? Now, to be clear, it's not only stopping because there's a hard code value. If somebody changed the formula, if they went to year 3 and they put a plus instead of a minus, it would also catch it because it knows that this one is different than the first one. So powerful. Watch this. What if there was 2 issues? What if this had a +30 and this had a +5? And I select the whole row and I press Control /. Look what it does. It highlights both. It tells me that both of these are different than the first one. So powerful. And now I can highlight them and I can go see what's wrong. Guys, we have found hundreds and hundreds of errors by using this technique, this tip when looking at a model. Again, super helpful, especially in long models, but it's good in any model. Now, I'll tell you another tip as well is use Control and the / to look for row differences. By the way, or if that keyboard shortcut is not working, or you can once again to the F5, which is the go-to, right? Special, and then row differences. So let me show you here. You can do it a couple different ways. I can select the row and then press the F5 key. And then once again, click Special. And now do you see where my cursor is? It says row differences. There's also an option for column differences if you want, but I can click on row differences and click OK. It does the exact same thing. It just takes a little bit longer if you go through the F5 go-to menu, but it's exactly the same technique. Hopefully the Control / works. And if not, maybe you can find it on your keyboard. On my keyboard, the backslash is often near the enter key. Okay, it's often near the enter key on the keyboard, but you do have a couple ways. I will tell you, you can also do this on a block of cells. You don't need to go one row at a time. You can do this on a whole range, a rectangle. Watch this. Take a look, please. Let's imagine that I was checking this rectangle. I want to check this area of the model, and I'm going to check this. And let's pretend that there's a +5 here, a bunch of nonsense, +5 in this one, and someone entered +2 on this one, and this one is going to be +1. And let's pretend this one is also a +8. Who cares? Whatever. My point is, I've just added a bunch of errors and hard codes in a bunch of these cells. Let's pretend now I was checking the first column, and I went down the column and I said, the first one, does this look good? Yep. That formula looks good. How about the next one? Yep, that's good. Third one. Yep, that's good. This is good, and this is good. Perfect. So I just discovered I like all of these. Watch if I select the entire rectangle and press Control and the backslash. It treats each row separately. So I know that in the top row, this one is different than the first one, and so on and so forth. And if I take that out, let me do this. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to remove all the errors, because the last thing I want to do is show you what happens if there's no errors. What happens if everything is working perfectly? So I removed all the hard codes. So let's imagine, please, you checked the first column, and now I select the whole area and I press my Control backslash. Look what happens now. It says no cells were found. That's perfect. It looks like a warning, but it's not. It means it did not find any inconsistencies, no differences. That's perfect. It means I just checked all of these cells. I never need to look at any of these cells because I know that they're exactly the same as the first one. Someone built it and then copied it. And now I can, as I go through my check, copy this down, and this section is now fully checked. Very powerful. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are going to try this one? I really hope you use this one. This one I find, so just let me know if you're going to, thank you, Joanna. Excellent. Yeah. Daryl, thank you. Martin, nice. Yeah, I really hope you guys use this. Let me know, by the way, if you ever find an issue or an error this way, you will find stuff. We find all sorts of stuff with this particular keystroke. I hope it works because, again, it's a really great way. So again, imagine, guys, so now we're into number 5. Imagine that you're checking a model and you've gone through the first 4 and you've probably spent, I don't know, you've probably spent 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes at most, checking a model, and you've already discovered a half a dozen or more issues. This model is not going to get stuck to you because you're finding stuff. So really powerful. What I want to do now is I want to go through 2 more. I want to go through 2 more tips and then jump into the process that I find to check a model. And after I review the process, I'm going to come back with a couple more tips and then open it up for questions. Again, if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat. Julian's keeping track. And then we will discuss them at about 20 past the hour. Okay. So the next thing I want to show you is my all-time favorite keyboard shortcut to check models when I'm checking a model. There is a keyboard shortcut to navigate while checking a model. So there's a great keyboard shortcut to navigate around, because the point is, if you are checking a model, you need to move very, very quickly. You're going to want to move very, very quickly when you're moving through, because models are big and you need to cover a lot of ground very fast. So let me show you an example here before I get to the tip. Let's go through a simple example. Once again, on my revenue schedule, I'm checking this sheet. And the very first thing I do is I go into the gross selling price row, and I notice that this cell is coming from somewhere else. It was linked to a different sheet. By the way, if you're wondering about the 3 cell colors, in our first webinar, we talk about the fact that we typically in model convention is to make input cells blue. So my blue cells are my data inputs. Those Those are historical values. Black cells are formulas. We use a third color. This is not as much industry standard, but the idea we see used a decent amount. We like to use a third color to indicate when we are repeating an assumption. Specifically, one of my input or assumptions that lives on an assumption tab or a scenario tab, because what this tells me is, this number was actually an input in the model. I'm just repeating it here. I'm just using it again to make my formulas a lot simpler. So anything that's this purple is just a repeat of an assumption. Okay, no problem. So my question is, if I'm checking this model and I see that you have linked it to a different sheet, what am I going to want to do? What am I going to do right now? As soon as I see that this cell is linking there, well, of course, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to go there. I want to check it. I want to make sure that it was linked correctly. What do some people do? It's very painful. Some people open up a pad of paper and they write down, okay, scenarios G23. Then they use their mouse and let's find it. Scenarios. Where am I going? 23. Wow, that was painful. That was painfully slow. If you're going to do that all day long, it's going to take you hours. I don't want to do that with my mouse. Some of you may know that with a mouse, you can also double click. Now that depends on a setting in your Excel. If the setting is set a certain way on the edit area, you can double click. But I want to show you a great keystroke. And the keyboard shortcut that I want to show you is this one is going to be the control and the left square bracket to go to precedent cells. Okay, so control in the left square bracket is going to take me right to a precedent cell. I bet you a lot of you already know that. I bet you a lot of you use that, and you should. Watch what happens, please, guys. If I go to this cell and I press control and the left square bracket, which on my keyboard is beside the letter P like Peter. Look what happens, please, when I press control left bracket. It takes me right there. Boom. Takes me right to that precedent cell. What if I go to a different one? What if I want to check the cost inflation? That's also a simple link. Take a look, control left bracket. Boom. It's correctly linked. Takes me right there. What about this one? This one's coming from the assumption sheet. I want to go there and check it. Yep. Okay, I go there and it looks good. I bet a lot of you know that. But over the years, a lot of people have said to me, they've said, yeah, Ian, I knew that. I know that control left bracket takes me there. But what they want to do now is they say, but I want to go back. How do I go back? They know that control left bracket takes you there. So a lot of people think, well, if control left bracket takes you there, maybe the control right bracket is going to go back. Now that doesn't work. That would be much, much too simple, too obvious. How do you get back? Well, to get back, we're going to use the F5 key one more time. Watch. If I press the F5 key and then I immediately press enter, F5 enter takes me right back where you came from. So now I'll put this down here. Control left bracket goes to the precedent cell. And then I'm going to say F5 enter goes right back. Guys, watch how fast this is. Watch how fast it is to check a model when you're using this technique. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like if I'm checking a model. If any of you ever emailed me a model to check it, it would look like this. I would go to a cell. I would say, where's that coming from? Control left bracket. Yeah, it looks good. They linked it. Let's go back. Good. What about this one? Okay. Yep. Control left bracket. Perfect. Looks good. They linked it up properly. Let's go back. F5 enter. What about this assumption on the assumption page? Yeah. Okay. Let's check that one. Yep. Looks good. And F5 enter takes me right back so fast. And that's what you want to be able to do as you're bouncing around to check links. So that's why I'm a big, big fan of that particular technique. Okay. So that is tip number 5 here. It says when reviewing a link, press control on the left bracket to go to precedent cells and then F5 enter to go back. Now, what if the formula has 2 cell references? Take a look, guys. What if the formula has 2 cell references, the red one and the blue one? Well, it's pretty nice. If I press control left bracket on this formula, it actually takes me to both. It will select both of the precedent cells, but it only does that if they're on the same sheet. It will only, so you see this formula here, revenue is price times volume. They're both on the same sheet. So if I press control left bracket, it selects them both. but that's because they're on the same sheet. What a lot of people will ask me now is they'll say, yeah, but Ian, what if I have a formula linking to lots of sheets? So I'm going to build a really silly formula here. I'm going to build a formula that's linking to a whole bunch of different sheets. I'm going to make up something that's nonsense. Just bear with me. I'm going to make up something really, really silly, a nonsense formula that looks something like this, just to show you the idea. I'm going to build a formula that says take a number on one sheet, divide by a number on the second sheet, then multiply by this number on a third sheet and add that. By the way, in our first webinar, we call this a disaster. I would encourage you never to build formulas like this, but many, many models have cells that look like this. By the way, with a quick show of hands, how many of you have ever seen a formula in a spreadsheet model like this that's linking to lots and lots of different sheets? How many of you have seen that before? Yeah, lots and lots. Yeah, Ilya, right? Michael, I can see your hands. Thank you. A lot of you have seen this. I see this all the time. By the way, what would I do? What would I do? Can I get it? No, I have one that I have to keep. But what would we do? What's my strong recommendation instead of doing this? Again, if I'm auditing a model, I don't want to do this because this is really hard to audit, to check. So what we strongly recommend, and I talk about this in webinar 1, is to repeat each of the cell references like this. Put each one in its own cell and label it. So label, and then have your calc. So what I would do is I would repeat the first one, repeat the second cell here, repeat the third one, just break it out into numerous rows. And then my formula here will say equals this, divide by that, multiply by that, whatever. It'll be much cleaner to understand. But I get it. I know that in a lot of models, people have things that look like this. So what do you think will happen if I have a lot of cells on different sheets and I press Control and the left square bracket? If I press my Control left bracket right now, is it going to take me to all of the cells? No. What's your guess? Well, if your guess is it's going to take me to the first one, then you're correct. Watch. This is summary sheet I-11. Take a look. If I put my cursor on this cell and I press Control and the left bracket, it takes me to the first one. Perfect. And now I can press F5 enter and I go right back. Great. No problem. But people say to me, yeah, but Ian, how do I check the second one or the third one? How do I check those ones to make sure those are linking correctly? A really nice way to do this, not very well known. Take a look. If I want to quickly check this cell on the assumption sheet, all you have to do is very, very carefully just select that one cell reference, just perfectly that one cell. And now watch. Now, if I press F5, one more time, the F5 key, look, that cell lives in the reference sheet. So if I press F5 and then enter, it actually goes to that middle cell. I can actually move it around with my arrows if I want, but I could check it. What about the third one? I can very, very carefully select this cell reference and then press F5 and then enter one more time, and it takes me there. So that's not very well known, but within a really long formula, it's a really nice way to check cells within a big calc. Now, again, my preference would be to rebuild this formula by adding some rows. But if you need to check it really carefully, at least you can check each cell reference. Okay, so that was point number 6, is to check a cell reference from within a long formula, then select the reference, and once again, press F5, enter, and it will take you right there. Really powerful, very, very helpful. And guys, I will tell you that, oh gosh, I mean, if you just go through these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 skills, you're going to find so many issues and errors in people's models. I'm going to come back to number 7 in a few minutes, but before I do that, I want to move on to the next part of our webinar now, which is on a process. I want to spend about 10 minutes here showing you a process to check a financial model. Do you know why? Because so often people call me and they say, I'm overwhelmed. Where do I start? How do I even start checking a model? Where do I go first? What should I look at? And I will tell you, I often find a pretty significant problem with the way people check a model. You know what people often do when they want to check a model, guys? They start at the beginning. Sounds obvious, right? Start at the very beginning. A lot of people will check a model and they'll spend 20 minutes looking at the assumptions, and they'll say, okay, what did they assume for costs? What did they assume for the interest rates? Is that reasonable? And they'll look carefully at all the assumptions to see if they're reasonable. My point is, who cares? There's no point looking at the assumptions until you know that the model's working properly. If the model's not working properly mechanically, it doesn't matter what the assumptions are, because there's going to be lots of errors and mistakes anyway. So don't waste your time validating the assumptions until you know that the model's actually working. You know why people check assumptions first? It's because that's often the way we build models. I'm going to show you this, a slide. This is, in my view, an optimal order to build a model. This is the optimal model build order. Now, everyone has their own approach, but generally this is what people do when they build models. We recommend this in our first webinar that we do. First of all, don't even get into Excel until you've made a plan, until you've designed it. So we plan and design our model. Then once we understand what all the assumptions should be, then we build the assumption page, build a scenario page. Then you can enter the historicals, or you can enter the historicals earlier. It doesn't matter. But you're going to do all this. You're going to plan it. You're going to put in the assumptions, scenarios, your financial statements. This happens at the beginning. And then we start building schedules. We build a revenue schedule. And then once it's built, you link it into your financial statements. Then you build another schedule. And then you link that into your financial statements. And you repeat this over and over until your financial statement's done and your balance sheet's balanced. And that's the optimal build order. I'm going to share with you a bit of a secret here that people don't usually do. My strong recommendation is that while there's lots of different ways, my strong recommendation is to check a model in reverse order. Check it in backwards order from the way you built it. And be very disciplined at the way you check it. It's really helpful to check in reverse, which means when I first open up someone's model, I don't look at the assumptions. I don't care. I want to make sure the model's working before I actually bother looking at the assumptions. So what do? I go right to the middle, right to the financial statements. So I like to start with the financial statements, and every time I find a line that's okay, I'll mark it okay if it's working properly. So what's the order? So part one, check the financial statements, make sure that they're working properly. Start here. So the first thing I do on the financials is I check the formulas on the financial statements. And let me show you how I use the keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to show you how I use the keyboard techniques that I showed you earlier. Let's take a look here. I'm going to go to the model. I'm going to go right down to the financial statement. Let's make sure the financial statements are working. I will do something as simple as check every little formula here, but only once. Guys, you wouldn't believe how often I've looked at a balance sheet and the formula for current assets is not that, but accidentally they missed a row. They missed a row. I see this all the time. Teach courses at some universities as well here. People often, they'll add a row and then they'll forget to pick it up in the sum. Well, of course, if you do that, you're not going to balance. So what I like to do is first check the simple formulas. Now, and then I don't want to check every one. I check one. Now I'm going to select the whole row. Are they all the same? What was the keyboard shortcut? Remember, control and the backslash. So now I go control backslash, says no cells found. That means if this one's perfect, all of these must be perfect. And I mention and I indicate, okay, I do that for here. I check this row. Is it all the same? Yeah, looks good. And I will do that all the way down. I will check every formula really fast. It takes 1 minute on the balance sheet. That's it. Check this one. Make sure it's all consistent. Yeah, mark it okay. Did this one? Check it, check it, check it. I'll do that to make sure just the totals are working. Because again, it's amazing how often you find little mistakes there. I'll do it on the cash flow statement. Are the totals working? Yep. Check it. Check the whole row. Mark it okay. Every single time. Check that. It's amazing how often. Or you'll find it, or they'll make it circular. People will do this in sums. Instead of going 121 to 124, they'll include 125 by accident, which of course is a circular reference now because I've included the answer in itself. So it's very important just to check the formulas, mark them okay. I'll do the same on the income statement. Is my net income good? Yeah, check the whole row. Is my EBT row good? Yes, yes, yes. And that is step number one. The whole thing takes a couple of minutes. That's it. What I want to do next is check all the links. Are all the links working properly? Are all the cells properly linking to the supporting schedules? So on my revenue schedule, on my income statement, I want to make sure that each row is coming from the right spot. So I will go to my revenue line. It's linking to the revenue schedule, and I want to see where it came from. So I'll use the other keyboard shortcut I showed you. Control and the left square bracket. Take a look. Control and the left square bracket. Boom. Takes me right there. Perfect. And then I'll come back. F5, enter. Remember this? If I go control left square bracket, takes me to a precedent cell. I like it. I want to come back. F5, enter, brings me right back. I do that one. Then check the whole row. Is the whole row the same? Yes. No problems. So now I know that this link is perfect. The whole row is perfect, and I can mark it okay. This could be a 30-year model, and I just checked all 30 cells here in this row. And I do that for every single row on the income statement. Every link. Is the cost linking correctly? Check the whole row. Each one. Is depreciation linking correctly? Yes. Check the row all the way down. That allows me to check the formulas on the financial statements and the links. I'm working my way out backwards from the middle. Once I know that my financial statements are working properly and linked properly, then I can review the calculations on the supporting schedules. So now I'm going to go schedule by schedule. I'll start at the top and I'll say, are the formulas correct here? Is the revenue row here correct? Yep. Price times volume. That looks good. So many errors we catch. Guys, look at this. This is gross revenue. So it should be the gross selling price times volume. It's correct. It's amazing how many times we'll see this. Accidentally, the model builder did that. They'll have done net price times volume when they were supposed to do the gross price. And then if they deduct freight and warehousing, then they've got the wrong revenue number, right? Because now they took, this is really net revenue minus freight. And now this number, this is a total error. So the point is, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check each formula. Is it look good? Is it the correct formula? Yep, looks good. Check the whole row, mark it okay. Check, check, check every formula. And finally, check the links. Check to make sure that all the assumptions are linked correctly. So I showed this to you already. If you see a cell linked to an assumption, check it, go, control left bracket. Looks good. And then F5, enter. And now I come back. Make sure the whole row is consistent and mark it okay. Very fast if you use this technique. And that is the approach. So that's what we do is you check the statements, check the links to the schedules, review the calcs on the schedules, and then make sure that all the links back to the assumptions are good. Guys, then and only then does it make sure to confirm the reasonableness of the assumptions, because there's no point checking the assumptions until you know the model is working. But now I can make sure that the assumptions are reasonable. So now I'm going to come back and show you two last powerful skills before we wrap it up and open it up for questions here. Okay. So now that I know my model is working, now I can go say, are the assumptions reasonable? Are they impacting the model as I would expect? Because I know the engine is working. Are the assumptions working here correctly? Well, let's take a look at what's going on. Here's the problem. The problem with checking assumptions is this. Does everyone see here? I've got some cost assumptions. My raw material cost is $226 per unit. Okay. My raw material cost is $226 per unit. Okay, great. But what if I wanted to make it $250? I want to make the raw material cost $250 per unit, and I press enter. Okay. Well, what happened? What did that do? How did that change my model? I have no idea. So now what I need to do is I've got to go there. I've got to go into my model and check. I've got to say, okay, I changed the cost. Now let me go into my model. Let me see, what did that do to see if it's reasonable? Did it change the numbers in a way I would expect? Well, let's see, EBITDA went down, net income went down, but I don't remember what they used to be. My point is I'm constantly jumping back and forth. I'm always jumping back and forth to check a number I'm constantly jumping back and forth to check, to change a number and then see what did that do to the outputs. So my message for you is this is the process to check. So on this one, let me just put a note here, see slides, but it's often helpful to check a model in reverse order to how you built it, okay? Often helpful to check in reverse order. Let me now point number 7 here. When validating the assumptions, okay, when you're validating the assumptions in a model, it's nice to see the answers right away. What's happening with the answers right away? Well, I'm going to show you 3 really powerful ways to change the inputs, but immediately see what that's doing to the answers. And then this is going to quickly get us to wrap up here. So I got another 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll stop and take some questions. So what are 3 great ways to check to see the answers when you test your assumptions? What I would say is create a simple, this is one easy way, very simple, create a simple output box right on the assumptions tab. No big deal. Very, very simple. Some people like this a lot. So as an example, look what I could do. I found a little bit of white space on my assumption page here. Oops. So what I could do is simply just quickly build here. I could just build another area, another rectangle that looks like this, and I could call this my model outputs. And let's say I want to check for, let's say EBITDA, whatever, and net income, doesn't matter. And I can look at it over a couple different years. All I need to do here is show my years, my 2020, 2021, 2022, no big deal. And then very simply link them up. So this is pretty easy. All I need to do is, you get the idea, is I can build a very, very simple output box right on the assumption page. Now it sounds pretty simple, but we do this a lot, and it can be a very effective way to, when you change an input. Now, when I change the input, I can see some of my key output values right there. So that can be one nice way. You might like that. But I want to show you 2 really great technical tools that are built into Excel that might help, that you might find helpful as well. The first one, that I'll put this as option B because I already showed you the first one here. The second thing I want to show you is to use, I'm going to say use Excel's watch window. I think I might have covered this in the first webinar. So for those few of you that were here, you might have seen this, but let me go through it again. Many of you were not here. Use Excel's watch window, which lives under here. It lives under the formula menu, and then there's a feature called watch window. It is Alt M and then the W. A lot of people say to me, Ian, is that new? Is that a new feature? The answer is no. It's been there for a long, long time in Excel, but it was not always visible. It used to be hidden. So take a look here. But they recently in the last version or 2, put it right on the menus. So look what happens, please, guys. When you click the watch window, it says, hey, what do you want to watch? I'm allowed to watch anything I want from deep within my model. So I'm going to say add watch. I'm going to click add watch, and now it says, where do you want to go? Well, let's go to our model sheet, and I'm going to click on the first 3 years of EBITDA, and I'm going to click add. And what it does now is it shows those cells directly right here in my watch window box. Great. Let me add another one. I'll click add watch, and I will add a second one. I will click on the first 3 years of net income and click add again. And now I have my EBITDA and I've got my net income, and they're right here. Well, the beauty, of course, watch this. If I ever change one of my inputs and I make the raw materials 250 and I click enter, keep your eyes on the box in my watch window. Take a look. Everything changed. And so now I can be looking at stuff all over the model. Deep, deep, deep down, I can look at some ratios, valuation numbers, whatever you want. And I can see what that does as I am validating the inputs. Is it having a reasonable impact as I would expect on the outputs? So it's a very powerful feature to use when you are when you are working with the model. How many of you are going to try this one when you get back? How many of you will try the watch window? I hope some of you do. Raise your hands if you're going to try this. Please try it. I really hope you do. It is a really, really powerful tool. Great. Excellent. I really hope you like it and try it. You know, the other thing, nice thing, guys, look at this. What else is nice about the watch window? Take a look. As I go to a different sheet, watch. If I go to a different sheet and I decide to run not the base case, but I run the best case, take a look inside my watch window. When I click on best case, look, every number changed. So I'm seeing as I go to the worst case, what's happening to EBITDA, net income, right? So again, really powerful to go anywhere you want and you're seeing what's happening to values deep within the model. So that is the second one. The third one that I want to show you as a way to test your inputs, but see what that's doing to the outputs is I'll put a note here that says, use Excel's camera tool. Yes, believe it or not, Excel can take a picture. It has a camera. How many of you have ever used, how many people here have used Excel's camera tool already? Raise your hands if you have ever used Excel's camera. No, oh, one hand. Okay, excellent. One hand, Michael, very nice. You are in a true minority. Good job. Yeah, it is a very, very obscure, not very well-known tip. That's amazing that you've seen it and used it. Let me show you guys the camera tool. You're thinking, what? I had no idea that Excel could take a picture. Well, it does. Watch this. But here is an issue. You won't find the camera on your toolbars, on your menu, which is why you're probably wondering where it lives. Well, to use the camera tool, you first need to activate it. You need to activate it from the tools options menu. It's there, but it's hidden. Guys, look at my screen. Do you see I have a button here called camera? That's because I activated it. It's on my quick access toolbar. Can you watch quickly? I'm gonna show you where this is. I go to the file menu, and then I'm going to options, file, options, and I'm going to go to the quick access toolbar. Look at this. This is pretty neat. When you go to quick access toolbar, you can go to all commands. And when you go to all commands, it shows you a list of every single feature in Excel. Guys, this is amazing. There are hundreds and hundreds hundreds and hundreds of features in Excel that you had no idea. Did anyone know you could add accrual reflection below? You probably didn't. Actually, I don't think I'd noticed that one before either. But yeah, believe it or not, there's a feature called add accrual reflection below your whatever. But there are so many things in this list you've never seen before. You never heard of these things because they're not on the menus. There are hundreds. Look, I'm still in the A's. When you have a few minutes, if you're bored one day, check out some of these great features in Excel that you didn't know existed. But look, I'm going to go to the category C. There's an option here, believe it or not, called camera, and it's right there. And I'm going to grab it and I'm going to move it to the right. This one I don't want anymore. I'm going to remove that one. If you move it to the right, then anything on the right side will live in your quick access toolbar. So please watch when I click OK. What happens is, here's my camera. How does it work? Take a look. Let's pretend I wanted to check my income statement. I can go to my income statement and I'm going to select the whole income statement. You see that? And take a picture of it. I'm going to click the camera, which takes a picture. Look, it's now selected it. Now I have a little cursor tool. I'm going to go back to the assumption page and just click once off to the side. And now what it did is it pasted a picture. This is a picture of my income statement. But wait a second. This is not just a dead picture. This is a live picture. Take a look. If I change my raw material to 250 and I press enter, look what happens. The picture changes. All the numbers updated. You see here 65, 65. So it's very powerful. I've had people ask me if they could build a dashboard and take pictures of lots of different things and work them onto their dashboard. It's a great idea. And you could show some visual answers right in your assumptions. How many of you are going to try this one? I hope some of you try this. Raise your hands if you're going to give this one a shot. I hope you do. It's not very well known. You will surprise people when you show it to them because people don't know it exists. Good. Excellent. Excellent. A lot of hands. Thank you. I hope you try it. I hope you like it. And that's what's going on there. So guys, that is my list. I'm going to, as I said earlier, now there's a few other things you can take a look at when you start working. Actually, I'm going to show you one tiny thing very fast here and then take questions. We're right on time. The last thing people, because I often get asked this question in the Q&A session, people say, Ian, you just showed us a bunch of tips and you didn't even talk about the actual formula auditing tools. Excel has its own formula auditing tools. I didn't talk about them because I know you probably know them and you probably use them. They're okay. They're not my favorite. They're not the first thing I do. If you've never used them before, they just light up arrows to show where a cell is going and where it's coming from. So as an example, if I'm here and I want to know where does my revenue figure go, I can go Alt into my formulas. So I'm going to go Alt M, and then dependence D shows me where it goes. So it lights up this blue line. But now if I want to go there, I have to double click. I got to carefully go to the blue line and double click, and it shows me where it goes. If I want to see where this cell came from, I can go to formulas and click on precedence. Shows me where it came from. But again, if I want to go there, I have to gotta very carefully double click. And then again, go in here, double click. I just find it a bit tedious. It's okay. If you like it, use it. It's not my favorite, but it is important, and I do use it. I do use it a fair bit. It's just not my all-time favorite. So my promise though to you today, if you can really think about and practice and learn these skills, you will find errors. You will actually blow people's minds and impress them that you found things that they didn't even think are possible. You might discover in column 19, in row 800, there was a mistake because of one of these techniques. So I hope you find lots of mistakes in models because then they won't stick to you. And again, you will create a lot of confidence and people will be super impressed. So guys, I hope you got some ideas on this. Julian, why don't we take a look and see, were there any questions that came out of the session here?
Yep, there were. So the first question we have comes from Jeffrey. And the question is, when two or more cells are selected, which keystroke are you using to toggle between them?
Oh, great question. Thank you for the question. Thank you for that. I apologize. I usually remember to mention it. I did not, but I'm glad you asked. That happened in a bunch of times. So when I was on this revenue cell and there were two cells and I pressed Control left bracket, it lit them both up. It's just the Tab key with my left hand. So thank you for asking. Tab goes back and forth. Same thing here. When I showed you if there was a plus 30, oh, I still have a plus. If I do this, right, Jeff, if I go on this one and select Control backslash, selects both of them, tab, selects all of them. Thank you. I should have mentioned that earlier, but I'm glad you asked. Actually, Julian, we've got a very short survey as well. Do you want to, should we maybe just ask people to spend 1 minute doing that and then we'll go back to the questions? It just takes a second, I think, right? Is it?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll just share that in chat.
Why don't we share that in the chat, guys? And why don't we take a question? But we're going to ask you again. The CFA Society is very curious to know your thoughts and feedback. So if you have 30 seconds to please click on that link, it would be really great. It would be really great if you can click on that and share any feedback or comments. It just takes a second. And then in the meantime, Julian, what's the next question?
Awesome. So the next question is, Ian, what's the best practice on grouping cells and hiding them to show only the final result? Or is there something else you recommend?
No, there's nothing wrong. What I'm glad you didn't say, well, or did it use the word hiding? Right.
No, it said grouping specifically.
Yeah. Listen, there's nothing wrong. What gets us upset is if we see models and people have hidden column. By the way, I didn't have this on my list. I probably should. There's probably another tip. One thing that's a nice tip when you're first looking at a model is to select the entire sheet and then go to the home menu and go to the format, where the heck is it here, and go see if you can unhide any columns or unhide any rows, because if there's any hidden columns and rows, you want to be aware of that. That's dangerous, but there's nothing wrong with grouping. So for instance, if someone has a model and they went to the data menu, Alt A here, and then they went to the grouping menu, right, to grouping, and then click G, right, that puts a grouping handle. I don't have any issue with that. It's obvious. Anyone auditing, if I'm auditing your model, it's going to be obvious to me that you chose not to display these columns. I'm okay with that. You're making it clear to me that there's stuff here that I should go check out, and I'll do that. Can you just read the question one more time? I want to make sure I captured it. So I don't have any problem. We're totally comfortable if people want to, but I just want to make sure. Was there a second part to the question when they asked?
Is there an issue with grouping input cells and hiding them to only show the final result, or is there another best practice?
Yeah, there's another best practice. It really truly depends on the design of what you're doing and what you're trying to do. But sometimes we'll build, sometimes if you don't want to see everything here, and by the way, if you haven't done this before, there is a nice keyboard shortcut that Alt-Shift, right? If you go Control Spacebar selects a column, and then if you go Shift-Alt and the right arrow, it applies a grouping handle, and Alt-Shift and the left arrow takes it off. Nothing wrong with that technique. But sometimes what we'll see people do is if they have a lot of columns and they don't want to show all of them, they'll build a summary sheet, and they might use, let's say, some offset functions or offset match or index functions to just pull the final one. Or, I mean, there's different ways you can get around it. I mean, if you want to send me something, I can give you specific thoughts, but we have no problem with grouping is a totally fair, healthy way to deal with issues in a model. Awesome. The next one.
Our next question comes from Edwin. And they ask, are there tools other than Excel spreadsheets that are used for modeling?
Great question. The answer is yes. Well, so the question is, are there tools other than Excel spreadsheets used for modeling? So when it comes to building forecasts, of companies, there's only really two approaches that are used that I've ever seen. One are spreadsheets, and then the other is what I call black box software. So in spreadsheets, Excel is far and away the most common one used. I mean, although I got to tell you, more and more people are doing things with Google Sheets. I don't see Apple numbers used a whole lot, but Google Sheets is used. It's not quite as flexible, but there is some good things happening in Google Sheets. But typically in corporate environments, Excel is far and away the most common tool to build a forecast model like this. As far as black box software, yeah, I mean, a lot of companies run like software tools that run the forecast and build the forecast. They're fine. They're just never as flexible. You can never make the changes you want. Most people we know who use black box software for their forecasting end up dumping things out of it into Excel so that they can play with it or manipulate it or organize it or analyze it. So yeah, we don't see a whole lot. I mean, you might be wondering if people are using Python. We do a lot of, on our training business, a lot of teaching in data science and Python now. Python's got a lot of great uses, especially for managing massive data, big data, and other applications like web scraping, some really great things. We're not seeing people using Python for forecasting or modeling so much. So yeah, I would say it's a spreadsheet, which is likely Excel or a piece of software. You want to do the next one?
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And Daryl just hasn't added on that. They say we use R for modeling that isn't quite black box.
Okay, great. Well, if you're using R is so I'd love to know what you're doing exactly. I mean, we have typically, can you indicate in the chat what sort of industry? I mean, do you work in a pharmaceutical business or something like that? I mean, we are typically seeing R used, interestingly in the finance space, reinsurance. Okay, yes, thank you. That's what I guessed for statistical modeling. Yeah, exactly. Right. No, totally. R is a programming language. It is, in the world of finance, R used to be the leader, but now Python has lapped it numerous times. So the reason I asked you about pharmaceuticals is because certain industries are still using R a little bit more as sort of a programming language to analyze numbers. But as you've just indicated, right, Daryl, it is typically more statistical, big data, regression, statistical analysis, things like that. We haven't seen people use R to build like a company model. But in the finance space, in the finance sector, like in corporate finance, in the world of debt, of equity, of M&A, hedge funds, asset managers, research, Python has become hugely popular, and we're not encountering people using R in those, but it's really user specific. Python's a little bit easier, I guess you know that, right, Daryl? Python's a little easier to learn, and so that's why the finance professionals are gravitating to Python. But it's a good question and a good comment. Thank you. One or two more. Do we have time for Julian before we wrap it up?
Sounds great. So our next question comes from Fiona, and the question is it a good idea to use the same financial modeling skeleton without the assumptions for various reasons, or do we start from scratch?
Oh, that's a great question, Fiona. I love the question. I'll be honest, I talk about that a bit more in the first webinar in the series on skills to build and design a good model. Honestly, I never like to start from scratch because a lot of the foundational work is going to be very similar. I mean, if you're modeling a company, there's always going to be some most companies have a lot of similarities. They have financial statements. They all have debt, right? They all have assets. So I never like to start from scratch. You know what I do, Fiona? This is literally how I like to renovate models and convert one model into another one. And literally, I'll do this. Fiona, I don't know if you were in the first webinar that I led for the CFA Society on skills to build a model, but one of the key messages I delivered was that a model should be effective as a paper tool. You should be able to PDF it and make it work as a paper tool. So I'm going to flip through. Imagine I emailed this to you. Look, as I flip really fast, here's my assumptions. Here's my assumptions. Here's my scenarios. Here's my revenue schedule, cost. It feels like a presentation. It's 15 pages long. You know what I do, Fiona? When I have to build a new model, I literally print out an old one. I take an old one that's going to be somewhat similar, or one that will be the closest one I can find. And then what I do is I literally print it out on paper, and I'll spend an hour marking it up. I'll use a pen. And so, for example, on the I'll change the name, everything by hand. I'll write it on, and I'm making a bit of a blueprint. I'll write by hand how I think the revenue should work, costs, what do I think the assumptions need to be. I'll plan out the model, and I make markings by hand everywhere. Then that becomes my my blueprint. What I then do is I go into my Excel model and I start changing it. And every time I make a change that I had written by hand, I'll highlight it so I know it's done. I change the name, and then I'll highlight it. And I will literally go through. Every time I redesign a page or reorient something, I will modify it, renovate it, and then highlight it here so I know that I have done it. And then once I'm finished renovating it, I go through all the checks that I just showed you to know that I've confirmed that I built it properly and I renovated it properly and it's still working. That's going to be much faster than building it from scratch because your formatting here, your designs here, your headers and footers are here. A lot of the infrastructure you need is already here. Okay, great question. We'll do one more, Julian, and then we'll let everyone get going. A lot of people still hanging around, but.
Sure. So the next question we have, is it good practice to include graphs, charts, and other non-quantitative info in a financial model?
Yeah, it depends. I don't have a problem with it. My only caution is that sometimes they can become memory hogs and they can sometimes make the file really large. So I'll give you two ideas on that. If you are going to include graphs and charts, my recommendation is just be really organized about it. I would encourage you not to have them scattered everywhere, but rather add a separate sheet. This would be a good instance to add a new sheet. Call it your graphs and charts, and then have them here. But what I would strongly encourage you to do is first repeat all the data. So what I would encourage you to do is, so you might do this, right? Anything that you're going to use in a graph below, first repeat it. So have all your net EBITDA, 5 years, net income, revenue, whatever, cash flow, whatever, debt, it doesn't matter, equity, who cares? Anything that you're going to need in a graph, literally link it up and repeat it back to the model sheet. So I would encourage you to do that. And I'll tell you why. So now I have here my 5 years of EBITDA, 5 net income. So this is just going to be a box. This will be a box here. I would encourage you to repeat all this at the top and then start stacking your graphs underneath it, but link them to this. Because then what you could do if you wanted is you could remove this sheet from the model. If it became a real memory hog, you could move this into its own sheet. And then the only thing cross-linking between the sheets is this one box where you're linking up certain numbers to the model. And if you don't want to link between files, you could literally just copy and paste them. It's not the best, but if there's not much, you could link them and then paste them in as values. You'd have to repeat that every time. But what you could do though, if that was an issue, you could have an output box down below. Down in the model, you could have one box that shows, again, EBITDA, net income, debt, equity, all the same cells, and link those above. And then literally, if you have to update your graphs, you take these cells, copy them, Go then what's in another sheet, another workbook, and just paste the values. So it takes 2 seconds, and then all your graphs would update. So if there's only a few, no problem. If there's a lot, it could start to really slow down your model. So that's my only tip on that point. Okay, but I like the question. Were there a lot more questions, Julian, or just a couple? Or
no, that was it.
oh, amazing. Okay. Well, guys, that's excellent. And in fact, I'm just, before we go, then, because you guys have stuck around, I'm going to show you one of my favorite new things in Excel. This is going to take literally 20 seconds. So if you've got 20 more seconds, I'm going to show you something that is a surprise to some people. This is, I'm going to tell you only when you get to the new version of Excel 365. They've tried to make Excel 365 a lot more dynamic. And so one thing that you can do is, believe it or not, watch this. Does anyone, just by a show of hands, does anyone here look at public companies? Does anyone follow stocks, or in your job look at stocks or stock prices ever? Richard, thank you. Martin, I see some stock hands going up. Yeah, excellent. Watch this. You may not know that this has happened in the new version of Excel. Take a look. Imagine I was following Apple stock, and I want to know what the stock looks like from January 1st of 2020 to, let's say, December, or just to today, whatever. I'll do it to today. So from January 1st of 2020 to May 3rd of today, I want it for Apple stock. Check this out. There's a brand new feature here called Stock History. It allows you to click on a ticker, enter a start date, an end date, and believe it or not, because Excel could never do this before, it's busy, but now it's working. And now it's pulled out for me the stock prices of Apple from January 1st or 2nd all the way down until today. Pretty wild, huh? And it even gets better than that. If you want to edit it, you can do even more than that. You can say, what kind of interval? Do you want daily data, weekly data? Let's go with daily. Then it says, do you want a header? Yeah, let's do a header row. And what kind of data? Let's include the date. Let's include the closing price, the open, the close, the high, the low, whatever. When I press enter, look what happens. Boom. It is now pulling out all this data for Apple. You want to look at Tesla instead? TSLA, press enter, busy, and now it's working. So you can kind of now dynamically link with one formula. Again, this only works in Excel 365. But this is the desktop version. This is not the web version, but it's a really great new feature. So I thought I would show that to you because you guys have stuck around. I appreciate that. Hopefully you can use it at some point when you get it. Guys, thanks very much for being here. It's really thrilled to be back. I hope I can get there in person. Always wanted to get to New Zealand. Would love to run a webinar or a course or a session in person at some point. If you have questions on the exams that we're offering through the FMI, please reach out and let us know. You've got my email address as well. Don't forget, on the Excel file here or on the slides, you can always reach out if you have any questions, and we hope to be in touch. So good luck with your modeling, with your checking skills, and we hope to see you all again soon at another webinar. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon, and stay safe, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.